everyone. I really don't need to introduce myself again. Isaac has done that, and thank you so much, Isaac. This is just what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about smart contracts, tokenization, real world assets. What they actually mean. How can we actually translate this into something meaningful that we can grasp as the Bitcoin we know, the Ethereum we know, cryptocurrencies we know. This concept of tokenization particularly, is it worth looking into? Because this concept is quite new and there's been some form of wave. And so we might not go deep talking about the technicalities, but we'll just have an overview as to what this thing is, particularly so that we get to appreciate some of these concept. And so yeah, this is like, of course, we all know when they say winter is coming, but in this case, I decided to say tokenization is coming. And so we'll just go on a very brief activity in 3 minutes. So I will just want you all to go to woclap.com. If you are with your phone, you can just have a screenshot. I mean, not a screenshot, rather, you can actually take scan this code, and let's have just a very brief exercise. And I'll be monitoring it on my own end here. Once we're done, we can begin. So yes, please, can we just go ahead and do that? Let's just have a scan of the QR code there.
Okay. What's the website? Is it woclap.com? So I can type it in.
Okay, woclap.com, yes, and then you scan that, or you can just insert the particular code when you go to woclap.com. So if you are there, if you're ready, let me know. So basically, I just really want to understand what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word tokenization or real world assets. So we have 2 persons joining already.
Okay, I think, let me think. Have you been able to visit the site? Let us know in the chat.
Yes, I mean, if I have 5 persons, I can just begin. I have 2 persons now. Okay, I have 3 persons now. It's going to be an interactive class, really. It's a lecture, but it's going to be an interactive lecture where we all have to participate, because even at the end of this class, we'll try to test our knowledge of what we've learned in the class.
Okay, I'm trying to visit the site from my own end. So.
Okay. But if everyone is having challenge, really, we can just go. I think, I don't know if there is any challenge in the chat box. If there's a challenge, I wouldn't want to waste much time. So we can just begin. Basically, just to have an understanding of what the people perceive as to what tokenization is, and then we can set the base for the class.
Okay, I think I'm in also.
Okay, fantastic. So I have like 5 persons. Okay, some my network as well. Okay, so I think I will just go with the 5 persons. It's okay. It's not a graded assignment. Yeah, so let's begin. So you just write, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word tokenization? Okay, I see somebody saying land. Is that all? Just land? Any other person? Coin distribution, okay, interesting. Okay, somebody says real estate. Okay, somebody say, okay, physical land, token, blockchain, okay, coin and asset. Okay. Okay, these are quite interesting thing. Okay, we have what other new word here? Real world asset tokenization. Okay, so okay, we have converting. Okay, interesting. So I think I'm going to close that. Now, it means that we all have some basic understanding as to what tokenization is and actually what is quite feasible now. What are some of the things we can actually get from this concept? What are some of the opportunities? What does it actually translate to? Because all these are terms related to what we'll be looking in today, right? And see if there are any connections we can make to increase our knowledge in this particular field. And thanks to Candle Web for actually organizing these classes. It has been a series of different classes so far, and it's also good we also have a look as to what tokenization reward assets are in general. And so I would also just love to play a very short clip. Please let me know if you can see this.
Okay, well, we can.
Okay, can you see the video and can you hear the sound?
There's no sound coming from the video. Can you hear the sound from your end? Let us know in the class chat.
Oh yes, I can hear the sound from my end.
Okay, the student said there's also no sound from my end.
No sound up to now. Okay, now this is somebody that is trying to give an overview as to what is actually coming, and what he's saying is I can send it. I will drop a link to this maybe in the chat box, and then you can probably watch it later. Now, what this particular guy is saying is trying to make us understand as to the power of what tokenization is. This is a very old video I saw about 5 years ago, and then sorry, 4 years ago. And what this guy is saying that every asset, every land, every token, every physical asset that you know that is actually existing that is of value, every property that you know that is of value will be tokenized. And basically, what he said is that it will be on the blockchain, it will be on chain. All right. And now, this for me it was very interesting because I was like, okay, so it means if I have, say, example, just to be very simple, I have a piece of land in Abuja, for example. How can I actually bring this to the blockchain? Because I see that land to be very valuable. So how can I take it to the blockchain? And so he explains that everything of value is definitely going to be on the blockchain. And we have many examples of things that are of value that are currently on the blockchain. For example, of course, even we see Naira being on blockchain now with CNGN, right? This is also an example of what a tokenization is. We see the USDT, the US dollar on the blockchain. This is an example of what tokenization is, even though sometimes we tend not to be very broad at it. But when we look at the whole concept of tokenization, this is actually what we're referring to. Things of value are actually coming on the blockchain. And so that is just to set the pace as to what we are really looking into. Because basically what we are looking into is to see how these things of physical value, these things that we hold esteem, right? How can we actually bring it to a global setting, to a global market for people to actually participate in, just like the way you can just go on probably any of these centralized or decentralized exchange and get some assets. How can we also make that a reality in the context of physical assets that we have, right? And so that sets the pace. And that is why we just have, for this particular course, we're just going to be talking about the foundation of blockchain and the smart contract. We are just going to be looking at the smart contract and see what is the involvement of smart contract in this concept of tokenization, right? What are reward assets and how are they actually in action? What is actually going on in this space? How do we turn real assets into something of digital value? And of course, the African continent is an interesting continent that we're also going to look at. What are some of the opportunities, right? what is Africa doing? Are there any form of challenges that Africa is facing, and possibly how can some of these challenges be addressed to ensure that we are not left out in the market? Because as we go to next slide, we'll begin to see other players in this space and what they're actually doing, and probably take an example of some of the few players also in the African market and also see what they are doing. And so this is the learning objective which I've already talked about. I'm not going to re-emphasize on this. Now, in order to be able to deep into this topic more, we have to understand some basic terminologies, right? When we talk of tokenization and reward assets, what are we referring to, right? Now, in as much as this is the key thing we are looking into, right, there are also other terminologies that have been attributed to it, things like custodians, things like smart contracts, things like oracles. I mean, if I'm going to tokenize a land, for example, right, and I'm taking it, making it putting it in a digital form, what happens if there's some certain form of financial crisis? Because we understand that lands appreciate and depreciate based on so many factors. And so if I'm tokenizing this, can it actually mirror the price of the physical land on have? And so this is where the oracles begin to come in. And so I will try as much as possible not to sound so technical, but to give a picture of what we are actually diving into. So what are smart contracts? From the beginning of this cohort, from the introduction of blockchain, down to this particular point where we are, the concept of smart contract shouldn't be new, but I'm just putting it here just to reinforce some certain learning that smart contracts are basically code, right? Written code stored on the blockchain, right? To help with some certain transactions, right? And basically these transactions are automated and they are not intermediaries. So I have a vending machine here. I most times like to use the vending machine, and most times when I just type in what I want and tap my card on the payment box, and then I get what I want. Now it's just an interaction between the me and the machine. Now there are some certain programs that have already been programmed in this particular machine, right? That is able to make me come and engage with this particular machine and get what I want from this machine, right? Without anybody interfacing us, I'm just able to interact with the machine directly. Now, this is what smart contract does. Now, the concept of smart contract is very, very important, because if I'm going to tokenize an asset, for example, land, I will be using land as an example. We have so many assets that can be tokenized. If I will have to tokenize an asset called land, and then I'm putting it on the blockchain, right? If people are going to engage in any form of transaction, let's say there's going to be transfer of that particular asset that has been tokenized representing the land, right? There has to be some form of legal agreement to be able to ensure that this thing is what it's automatic. Yes, that is the word, right? To be able to automate these transactions, so that there will be no breaches, there will be no constraints, and stuff like that. Now, this is where smart contract comes into place, because if anything of value is to be tokenized, right, and is to be put on blockchain, mind you, blockchain is just smart contract enabled, right? Because the third party interaction is actually taken out. And so we need to have a smart contract to be able to enable whatever transaction of any form of tokenized asset possible. And so that is what smart contract does, is basically code. Just like normal contracts you have in legal setting, physically in your court of law, right? They are just code programmed on the blockchain, right? Just to make transactions automated, to enforce automatic form of transactions. Now, what are some of the benefits of this smart contract, especially in the context of tokenizations? We see that there's an automation and transparency. Now, the transparency of smart contracts mostly is dependent on what is being coded, and that is why it can also come with some level of challenges that we've seen in the case of both, in the case of vulnerability, in the case of Oracle dependence. I'm going to explain what our Oracle is in subsequent slides. But of course, even in case of legal ambiguity, right? When you go to different regions, right, there are some form of legal constraints that probably might not allow you to do some certain things, or perhaps might permit you to do some certain things. But a well-built contract that caters for all this ensures that transactions are quite automated and quite transparent. Trustless transactions. Now, this basically just explains that there's no need for two persons can interact with each other without even getting to know each other, right? For example, I can interact with Isaac and I don't even need to know Isaac. Now, this is because every rules, every guidelines have just been placed on the blockchain to be able to permit this exchange, to permit this particular transaction. And of course, even the sense of security. Of course, it can be argued that the sense of security, depending on what platform it's being built, how it's being built, and probably if there are some form of malicious activity inserted on the code. But a well-audited smart contract gives you a very strong security advantages, right? So that is what the whole concept of smart contract is on the surface. Now, moving into tokenization and reward asset. Please, if I'm a bit fast, I think you can call my attention. And I don't know if we are all together, if you can hear me. Are we together? Hello? Is anyone with me? I want probably one person to unmute himself. Isaac, are you there? Hello? Interesting.
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I see some persons responding. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. So what's tokenization, right? Now, in very simple term, really, tokenization is just creating a digital form of a physical asset. You understand? Creating a digital form of any form of physical asset is basically what tokenization is. And so when we talk about tokenization of real-world assets, we're basically talking about, okay, real-world assets that we know, things of value. It has to be an asset, not anything. And because I can convert anything, doesn't mean I can see anything and then I convert, right? It has to be something of value. It has to be an asset, as the name implies, right? And so if you convert something like that into a digital token, is basically what we refer to as tokenization. Now, ideally, the whole concept of tokenization is really, as I write in the top right corner of the slide, is to bring the illiquid traditional asset on chain. Now, what do I mean? What are some of the examples of the illiquid traditional asset? Land example is quite illiquid. Real estate are quite illiquid, right? Now, how do we actually bring this on chain to make them liquid? Now, this also comes with a lot of questions which you also have to address, because if I'm going to bring a real estate into the blockchain and then make it liquid, what does it really mean? How does it really translate? Because there's issues with ownership, there's issues with the physical nature of it, and of course, even compliance issues, right? So there are issues with it. But basically, when we talk about tokenization, we're talking about how we can actually bring assets like that into the blockchain network and bringing them on chain, right? And so there are so many things that can be tokenized that I've just put in this image that I get from smart chainers. We can see fine art, we can see lands, we can see technology, we can see gold, we can see mine. So many. Real estate is one of the most important, not exactly most important, but it's also one of the things that people have been looking into and even tokenizing, which we also see in some examples, right? So when we move to the next slide, we talk about tokenization still, right? Now, how is this thing happening? How do we actually bring this asset of value in the physical world? How do we bring them into the digital form? Now, there are two processes to this, right? There's this first process which I've put, which is the technical process, which is quite technical, which has to do with the position of the art, right? The verification of the ownership. Okay, I say I have a land, I want to tokenize it. Okay, they have to verify if I'm actually the owner of this land, right? Now, we now talk about the creation, the evaluation of the asset rather, right? Okay, if I want to tokenize this land for this say 50 by 50. How do we value this, right? And even after valuing this, now we'll not talk about creating the digital token of that particular land. Now, how do we do that? Now, this is where we'll now begin to talk about, smart contract, start to develop fractionalizing that particular asset now to bring it on the blockchain, right? Now, these are all technical processes that if being done at the end goal, of course, is just really bring that into the secondary market, right? I was working on a project that last year. It's not FLI, but it has to do with bringing primary assets into the secondary market, right? Things that I in Nigeria Stock Exchange, basically, right? You don't get to access them in the secondary market like in the blockchain market. I would use that word, right? How do we get to access them? And so we are tokenizing stocks like that and trying to bring them into the secondary market so that people can have access to it, right? Now, when it comes to tokenization, technically, we have so many standards. Now, how tokens, for example, Bitcoin was being tokenized and being brought to the blockchain is a different mechanism when it comes to actually tokenizing reward asset. For people who are technically inclined, who are developers, this concept of ERC20, ERC721, ERC1155, these are all standards they are familiar with. And so I just put it there for you to know that, okay, tokenization happen in different process, in different stages, and of course with different smart contract standard. Now, while this is happening on the technical side, now there's also another side of tokenization, really, because it's not as simple as we see it to say, okay, because I have a land, I can actually tokenize it. Because I have a car, I can tokenize it. Because I have things of value like the intellectual properties or even strategies, then it means I can actually tokenize it. No, there's a high level of compliance that actually comes into place, right? And so there's the behind the scene, and then there's the technical side of it. As the before the technical side of it begins, there has to be some serious form of authentication, some serious form of check to be able to validate that, of course, this is of value. This asset is being owned by XY person, right? And then the securitization is quite sure. And so after that, we now begin to talk of, okay, how do we actually bring that into the blockchain, right? And now this is where things like regulations begin to come in, right? KYC, AML, and all of it. This is where all this begins to come in. And if I am to tokenize, say for example, a gold, for example, all right, I'm tokenizing a gold, right? Now there's the digital form of that gold, and then there's the physical form of that gold. It's also very important that the security of these two assets, in as much as they are mirroring each other, they also have to be guaranteed, right? And so if I'm saying I'm buying a gold, for example, on maybe any of these secondary markets that sell tokenized assets, what can I show to prove that I actually have this gold? Now, this gold might not be with me physically, but it has to be protected somewhere. It has to be stored somewhere. And now this is where the whole concept of even the traditional concept now begins to come into play to be able to ensure the security of that particular asset. And so also the token itself, we also need some form of security to be able to guarantee the security of even digital assets. And that is why we have so many custodians, which we are going to be talking about. And so this brings us to the concept of custodians, right? I've touched on that. Just like the way you have your physical asset and it needs to be protected, of course, even like your cash, for example, that you go and put in the bank to save it. So it is with this digital asset. Now, this digital asset also has to be protected. They also have to be guided. GK8, which is also one of the big custodian firms, one of their say is this, that trust is your most valuable asset, right? Because if I'm having a digital token that represents car, for example, right, and it's not well protected, it causes a concern for scams, right? And now the question is, if I have a digital asset, a digital token that is representing car, for example, and somebody steals that particular gold, how can I actually confirm even the ownership of that gold? And so we begin to see some level of concerns that actually arises from stuff like this, and that's why we need safe custodians, that in as much as the digital assets are being protected, so also the physical representation of those assets also have been represented. And we already have some players in this space, some global players in this space, like the BitGo, that the Fireblocks, which is quite common if you have been a while in the crypto space and in the blockchain space generally, right? Anchorage is also one of the players, and of course GK8, as I've said. We have so many other players. These are just examples, and we can actually search more. Now, what is Oracle? Now, this is another terminology that is very, very important, because if I'm tokenizing a piece of land that is worth, let me use Naira here, that is worth 500K, right? And initial tokenization, it's worth 500K. So the land is worth 500K. And then I tokenize it, let's say I have a maximum supply of 500 tokens, or let me say 500L, representing the tokenized land, and it's also worth 500K. Now, the question is, if there's a road construction, because we said there are some things that actually increases the value of physical assets, land in this case, which I was using as an example. Let's say the example, there's a road construction going in that particular place, and establishment of hospital. There are establishment of infrastructure that can actually contribute to the increase in the price of that particular land. Now, how can this reflect to the digital assets we have on the blockchain? Because if I'm tokenizing this, it means I'm having a digital representation of this. I'm tokenizing the land, there's a digital representation of that land. And so if the price of the physical land is increasing, definitely the price of the virtual land, let me use the word virtual land, or tokenized asset of that land should also increase, right? And now this is where oracles come in, right? Oracle actually bridge that connection, right? It creates a connection between the token you have on the blockchain and even the physical representation. And now this is where Chainlink come in. Chainlink is an example that helps to actually bridge that. And now, when you begin to see the price of an asset, a reward asset, which there are many platforms that we can actually look at, for example, when you begin to see the price of reward asset increasing physically, and you also see the tokens increasing even on the digital aspect of it, it's because of the Oracle, because Oracle tracks a lot of things, tracks prices. If it is token that has been affected by weather condition, because it tracks weather and so many data. And that is why the Oracle is very, very important, of course, to be able to keep check between what is actually going on in the physical world and even what is going on in the virtual world, in the digital world. And so this is where oracles now come into play. And so that is on some of the terminology, even though I've been able to give some broad explanation. But let's now deep dive into a tokenization of reward asset. Now I have this amazing outlook. This is just an overview. You can actually go on your system, if you may, maybe after the class, on RWA.xyz. Now, this is just a graph to show what is actually going on in this reward asset space. Now, we can see stablecoin, and I've said that before the class, or at the introduction of the class, I said that one of the popularly known tokens is stablecoin, but of course, very few people know that it is reward asset. Now, this is what I mean. For every 1 CNGN that you have, or for every $1 that you have on, say, for example, Binance, there's a physical representation of that particular dollar maybe in the bank in the US or somewhere. Right? And so this is one of the most exemplary reward assets that we can that I can give, right? That for every CNGN that you are having on your wallet, there's a representation of that particular Naira, right, in any of the CNGN custodian banks, right? And so you can see, so it says that this just shows that this particular Naira that you are having in the bank has been tokenized, and now you're able to have it in your digital wallet, right? And now this is what we know that is much more popular. But of course, there are also other things that can come into place that can also be tokenized, right? Because if currencies can be tokenized, then other things should be tokenized as well. And now this has to do with even private credit. It has to do with bonds. It has to do with stock. It has to do with private equity. It has to do with corporate bond, and so many, and so many. And now all these that you see listed here are actual examples of assets that have actually been tokenized, and that you can actually have them on chain. And so this is a graph with the stable coin showing that how stable can have been able to take a large portion of the reward asset so far. But of course, we can see, because as at 2022, that is when reward asset of other assets apart from currencies also begin to take shape. And we are expecting this to continue to grow, because as I've said, this concept is quite new, but a lot of people, like even the BlackRock, are already beginning to pitch their tents, into those spaces, and we can also see other players in this space. Now, these are some of the examples of some of the players in the space. Now, this is Kenix. It was referred to as Onyx, if I get the spelling, Onyxy, by JP Morgan, right? Basically what they do is also to tokenize specifically specifically to the US now, right? The US Treasury, right? And now they help to create like I don't want to use the word a blockchain, but of course they are able to tokenize this and create a settlement way for the sending and receiving of this particular tokenized US Treasury, right? And now there is a platform called Ondo Chain, which I also have as an example that you can actually look into, right? So we have Kenix as some of the players in the space, and they've actually done a lot of transactions so far. If you check out some of the statistics, the top right corner, we see the average daily transaction of this particular asset that is being tokenized, and even the year-on-year growth, right? BNY Mellon, it's a bank, and of course Goldman Sachs launches tokenized MMF, money market funds, right? Basically, short securities and all of you. And so we are seeing players in this space now that money market funds are also being tokenized. And now, for Goldman Sachs particularly, they even have their own DApp, right? We have the Goldman Sachs DApp, which is, of course, when we talk of DApp, we know we are actually referring to a blockchain in this case. And so they also have their own DApp, and this also allow the tokenization of money market fund. There are links attached to this particular image. You can go and read about them. This is so Franklin Templeton, which is also very, very popular. In fact, they even have their own token called HopeXX, right? And it's known to be the first mutual bond to use the blockchain technology, right? And so they also help in the tokenization of what US government monetary fund, and they have a token called what HopeXX. In the real estate, we also have players in the real estate, and it's called Lofty. Now, these particular people, they are much more focused into the real estate space. Now, we'll see how is real estate really tokenized. What are some of the, like when you say tokenized real estate, what does it even really mean? We are going to see that when we talk about some of the benefits of tokenization. Yes, but this is also an example. These are also players in this space, that much more focused in tokenizing real estate in particular, right? Now, this is a platform, and this platform also allows the tokenization of so many assets. Like the example we saw previously, we saw that they were able to use this particular platform, Ondo Finance, to tokenize several assets. And so this particular platform helped with several tokenizations. Dubai is also not left out. That is the Middle East. Now, they are in partnership with Mantra. Mantra is also a platform that helps with tokenization. And you can see this is also real estate focus. Now, so you can see this is the reason why I'm saying that when it comes to reward asset tokenization, one of the things drawing several attention is the real estate space. it's drawing much attention. And now I'm going to tell you why, because it's quite interesting. Where other forms of use cases that can be tokenized, fleet of cars, realty, commodities, anything of value. But I've said because you feel it's of value, doesn't mean you can actually go and tokenize it as you want. There are some stringent regulations that will have to come into place. There's some level of KYC that have to be checked before you can go ahead with tokenizing that. And so what are some of the benefits of these tokenizations really? What are the benefits of this tokenization really? Now, if say, for example, let me use land again, permit me to use land in this case for an example. Now there's a piece of land in, let me use Abuja, the city of Abuja. And now you have this land, and then, I mean, this land is up for sale. And let's say, for example, 1 billion naira. And I don't have 1 billion naira to be able to buy that piece of property, but I want to have a share of that property. How can I participate in something like this, right? And now this is where tokenization can come in. If we have a digital representation of that particular token, it allows me to be able to partake, even if I'm not buying the land completely, but at least I can donate, I can put in my, say, for example, 10 naira, 20 naira, to be able to take part of that. Now, the tokenization process that we see initially talks about fractionalization. Now, basically what it means is that you have this particular land, you create a digital token of that particular land with a maximum supply, and then you break it down into different fractions, right? And so tokenizing it, you are already having a digital representation of it, like your Bitcoin, for example, right? How many Bitcoin do we have? 21 million. And so, and that is the total supply. This particular land that I'm tokenizing, and I'm having a digital representation of that particular land, let's say with a maximum supply of, let's say, 1 million token representing that land. Whatever it's valued at, I'm not able to buy the whole land, but at least I'll be able to commit or maybe part way with my 1,000 naira, at least to be able to take a part of that particular land. And so that is what fractional ownership is. And so it's like stock. Just think of it like a stock. How that you go and you take part of a stock. That is what happens when real world assets have been tokenized. They have been fractionalized, and then you, who is outside, who doesn't even have enough money, can also take part, getting an ownership of that land. Now, so fractional ownership is a benefit, but even beyond fractional ownership, we have global market participation. Now, Bitcoin, for example, knows no continent, knows no religion, knows nobody. Anybody can buy it, right? As far as you have access to that particular a platform that probably sells it, right? Because in some countries, you might be prohibited, to have access to platforms that allows trading and all of you, right? But it's a global market. Anyone can participate, meaning there can be a land in the US, for example, and I will be able, if it's been tokenized and I have access to that platform, I will be able to take part in making payment for a fraction of that land that has been tokenized from the US, right? And this also brings us to the fact that if this is possible, it means money can, you can attract a lot of money. And this is where we now talked about our liquidity and accessibility, right? So this more money can come in. Now, you see, when more money begins to come into especially physical tangible asset, it's becoming very illiquid now, because there's just inflow of money, and this thing is quite illiquid, right? You can actually convert it at any time. And so putting a real world asset, tokenizing a real world asset and putting it on the blockchain just makes it open for players in different parts of the world to partake in. You understand? And so that is what we mean when we say it brings liquidity and accessibility, because everybody can now participate in in the purchase of that particular asset that has been tokenized, most especially when it is being shifted into the secondary market. Remember, when we talk about the processes, right, when we run through the process of tokenization, the final stage of that tokenization process is that it goes into the secondary market because it's when it goes into the secondary market that you and I will be able to, to make purchase of that. Right now, in the context of Africa, what is Africa really doing? Does Africa really have a place in this? What are some of the challenges, particularly for Africa? I don't know if you all can hear me. Just confirm again before I continue. Okay, I will need somebody to probably unmute himself and respond that you can hear me, please. Okay, thank you. I can see some persons in the chat box. Now, so Africa, as I said initially, when we think of giving this how we come when it comes to tokenization. Now, I believe we all have a picture as to some of the things because Africa, as I said, is a continent with so many. I was listening to, I can't really remember, but I know somebody was giving statistics of how we have over $10 trillion worth of resources in our continent. I believe it's more than that. Now, just imagine tokenizing things like that, having a digital representation of that, and just imagine what will actually happen to the economy. And now giving the explanation of some of the benefits that we have, right? And so Africa really has not just a small place, but a very big place. Before the call, I was telling Isaac how that even people are beginning to look at some of these opportunities, some of how they can actually play into this particular space, and even focusing on the African content. We already have players in this space, which I will just jump in briefly and explain. Okay, I don't know why it's not moving next. Okay, good. Now, how many of us know of Ubuntu Tribe? Let me go to the chat box so that how many of us know of this platform called Ubuntu Tribe? I mean, if you know, you can just drop a yes. Okay, I've heard of them. Candle Web said he has heard of them. I believe that's Isaac. Now, this is a very interesting example of a very good case that probably we can relate to, even though this company are located in Switzerland, but the founder is Momodu or so, if I recall the name clearly. Now, what they basically do is when you sign up onto their platform, you'll be able to have access to gold. Now, these gold that are actually buying is a physical representation of that particular gold in a vault. Now, this should make sense given my explanation as to what tokenization is, right? And so these are also players in the space, right? But in this case, what they tokenize is what? Gold. Now, in fact, they call that token GIFT. Gold International Fungible Token, right? That you with as low as $1, you'll be able to have access to some gold. And there's a physical representation of that gold in a vault somewhere, right? And so this is an example that we might be able to relate with. Now, Zen Finance is also players in this space. I think they are the first African tokenization investment platform from the few things I've looked up online. And basically, with as low as $5, be able to participate in some form of tokenized stocks and shares. Right. And so you can see that there's already a growing trend. There's already a growing trend. And we are going to see more and more and more and more platforms, coming up. I know some currently that are still under processes. We don't just want to call their names, but I know some that are currently under processes. They are soon, they will soon be live. I am also a part of some projects that also has to do with reward asset tokenization, right? And so people are building, people are really building, people are seeing where the money is actually going to. That is the truth. I wish that video the first video I played, I wish we were able to hear it, right? We begin to explain how that he was actually explaining how that there's a shift coming in. There's a drastic shift, just like with Bitcoin have come and make wave. So we might see a very big shift when it comes to the real world asset space, because there are a lot of players, and then there are big industrial players in this space, right? And so that is that. So in the African context, it really matters, right? It really matters. And despite the fact that we have some form of challenges, particularly in terms of financial inclusion. Now, statistics by PBA says that about 57% of African population is unbanked. Now, in as much as this is true, but I also see this as an opportunity, because I don't need to have a bank for me to be able to buy a token, do I? I don't need to have a bank, right? And so banking is good, it's very nice. But if you have this particular population on bank, right, and they are still able to participate in the tokenization even without a bank, it signals something. It signals something, right? And so, in as much as the population is the number of population of people is high that are quite unbanked, they also have access to participating in this particular movement, because they don't even need a bank. They can just use their digital wallet, if they have a digital wallet, with their digital wallet, they will be able to participate in stuff like this. And of course, we talked about how the fact that high level of illiquid assets makes it much more interesting even to look into this particular continent, right? In terms of the mineral resources from various countries, the likes of Congo, the likes of Nigeria, for example, so many other African countries with a lot of illiquid assets, right? Not even just the mineral resources, but of course, even tokenization is not just on land only. As I've said, we can think of it very broadly, right? Even agricultural products, right? Even farm stocks, right? As long as it's of value, and then there's a fiscal custody of that will be able to protect and guarantee the security of that can be tokenized, and that can be represented on the blockchain, which is the underlying concept of what we are talking about here, right? Having a fiscal asset that is being on blockchain. And so if there's a high level of illiquid assets, it's an opportunity to get this tokenized on the blockchain and attract liquidity and attract even global players into this particular space, right? And with that, tokenization cannot be it can actually serve as a financial bridge, right? And so, and with that, we begin to see that even the wealth of the nation we begin to unlock the wealth of this particular nation, because if there's if resources are being tokenized and then it's open to the global market, of course, as resources begin to come in terms of cash, I would say, this just shows you how large it is and how important it is even for that particular continent in question, as Africa as it were. And so when we look at tokenizing our properties, or when we look at tokenizing our assets, not just being local, but it's also bringing an introduction of even foreign funds, foreign direct investment, as I would say, into the continent of Africa, right? But of course, there are some level of concerns, as I've said initially, that also comes with it. And one of the major challenges really is in terms of regulation. In the crypto space, one of the recent regulations is market in crypto assets, right? And this regulation is stemming from Europe particularly, and now begins to address things that has to do with asset custody, like ownership of an asset, KYC. All these are quite important, because if regulation is not in check, and in fact, I'm telling you that if regulation is not in check in some certain areas, especially in the crypto space, the reason why some persons are not even susceptible to the crypto space is because of lack of regulation. And so regulation is greatly needed, right? And now we already see the Europeans, setting up some form of regulation. Now, even in Nigeria, we have some form of regulation that has to do with the crypto space. But in terms of the reward asset organization, are there any form of regulation? Of course, we might see that with time. But regulation plays a very, very important, because regulation also brings more adoption, right? When you have something that is quite regulated, you feel more safe to even participate in it, because there's a lot of skepticism that happen. Of course, even with blockchain, even up to tomorrow, some persons are still even skeptic as to interacting with cryptocurrencies and all of you. Now, this is because they feel there's regulatory blurry. There's no clear regulation into things like this. But of course, we can see Nigeria begin to play a very amazing role when it comes to regulation. With the Securities and Exchange Commission. As at last year, we saw the blockchain policy. We see policies in terms of digital asset custodian. I remember working on some research, and then my research had to lead me to some of these policies. And so, with time, as we continue to grow, as the continent continues to grow, as awareness continues to grow, there's definitely going to be a need for regulation, and this can actually drive even adoption. Technological barriers is also there now, given from infrastructure, given from internet penetration. But of course, recently I was also checking the penetration rate. It's growing. It's growing. While that might be a challenge at the moment, right? When we begin to compare it with developing countries, right? It will not be a challenge with time as long as our infrastructure actually put in place. Because if you were talking about tokenization, we're talking about digital assets. We are not talking about the physical interactions, right? We are talking about things that are actually individual in the digital world. And so there has to be some form of a digital device or digital enabler to be able to allow you to participate in that. And so there has to be growth in that so that it doesn't stand as a barrier to people's involvement even in this particular new trend, not even just for real-world asset tokenization, but even in the blockchain space generally. And the concept of market adoption is stemming from the fact that some persons can be very, very skeptical, right? But does it make any sense for me to say I'm buying a land, I'm buying a part of land? I mean, how do I get to... Some persons can still be quite traditional, right? But mind you, this is just trying to make things, this not even just trying to make it, but this is just making things illiquid, especially when you look at on the investment side of things, right? It's more an opportunity. And so we might experience some form of skepticism, issues as to people not even wanting to trust even the whole concept of tokenization because it doesn't make any sense to them. But that is why we have platforms like this, like Candle Web, that teaches, creates more awareness and make us appreciate, things, because the world is changing, the world is changing, the world is changing. I'm currently working on a project on digital transformation, how things are rapidly changing, what we know to be digital transformation is not really digital. Things are rapidly changing, and only people who are actually adopt to some of these changes can actually stand. One of my favorite quotes, especially for businesses, would be that people who actually lead the way are actually the most successful people businesses, right? And it's that business in itself is not just about catching up, right? Technology is not about catching up, right? It's basically about leading the way. And so this is a new sector. How are we leading in that sector? But I can tell you for sure, when it comes to the blockchain space, Nigeria is also one of the major players, also one of the major drivers in this particular blockchain space. And of course, even in the concept of reward asset tokenization, we are not to be left out, right? We also have a role to play. We also have, there's a position for us because there's a lot of opportunity. We have the market and we have this smart man. And so, in general, irrespective of whichever continent, whichever region, right, these are some consideration that we need to look at. We talked about the regulatory uncertainties because many jurisdictions have their regulation. When you come to Europe, you begin to hear the MICA. When you go to US, you begin to hear regulations like the Genius Act. So when different regions have their different regulation, and so this can create some form of regulatory uncertainties. I mean, interacting with some certain platform. Let's say, for example, if I'm in Nigeria, for example, and I'm buying a real-world asset on a US platform, under what regulation am I being guided? Am I being protected? Just think of it like the general GDPR or like the NDPR, right? If I'm interacting with a platform that is US owned, what regulations that is guiding my involvement with that particular platform? And so there are some form of jurisdictions, I would say, and of course, even regulatory uncertainties stemming from legal issues. We talked about the concept of asset custody, right? How these are very, very important in terms of security, both for the digital assets. If you are tokenizing, say, for example, gold, if you are tokenizing, say, for example, land, if you are tokenizing any art, right? There has to be security of that particular property. Naira is being tokenized. We have Naira on the blockchain now, right? And so there's already some custodial platform that are ensuring that whatever form of digital Naira you have as TNGN is also being backed. You know, it's not even just about backing now, but it's also more security. All right, no more than just backing. It also has to do with also security. Now, this with time, not even with time, but this is also an investment opportunities. And as long as you are looking at investing in platforms like this and making money in some countries, you are being taxed. You are really being taxed. You are really being taxed. And so we can begin to see, some form of taxation begin to stem in, and concept of compliance. Compliance is very, 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 very important, especially in the blockchain space, right? Liquidity risk, market adoption, which we've also seen, and of course the concept of Oracle. We talked about Oracle being the fact that we are creating a bridge that links the digital world and even the physical world in terms of variation in prices and all of you. What happens if there's an issue with this Oracle and then it's not picking the right information? And so this can be a big consideration. These can be things to consider when it comes to the whole concept of smart contract tokenization and reward assets. So in summary, just to wrap up the whole class, we've been able to talk a bit about what smart contract is and how they play a role in this concept of reward asset tokenization. We looked at what tokenization is, and we just say that it's basically tokenizing, creating a digital form of whatever it is you have physically, right? Just creating a digital token of it, and this allows a fractional ownership. I don't need to have a whole ownership of that particular asset. I can have a fraction of that particular asset. Oracle is there. We talked about a bit of that. We talked about reward asset tokenization, and we looked at also some of the institutions. And now the reason I had that is just to give you a picture that there are several players. When you go to real RWA XYZ and you look at some of the players, there are over 224 issuers of reward asset tokenization. If you remember, I know of ADD, I know of ACA. There are so many of them. And so there are so many people playing in this particular space. Now the question is, what is your knowledge of this particular space, and how can you even come in? How can you actually play in this particular space? And it actually starts with the awareness, which is what we have now. And I also encourage us, to search more. Now, so that will be the end. But I'm just going to have a very short quiz to begin to test our knowledge, and then maybe we can have question and answer. Thank you. Isaac, are you with me?
Oh, yes, I am with you. I'm excited for the quiz.
Oh, you are excited for the quiz?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share my screen again. Let's see. Yeah, so you can just go to Work Lab, and then let's just take a part in this quiz. It's going to be very simple, just to have to see our understanding of what.
All right. So please scan the QR code on the screen in order to access the quiz, or you can visit worklab.com and enter the event code you can see on the screen, LGBKJD. I believe. Okay, how many people do you have in the quiz right now, Abel?
Okay, I already have just have 2 persons right now. I'm
Okay.
going to stop and share my screen again. Okay, let me share this.
Okay, anybody who is already at Book Club, please just copy the link to the entire event and drop it in the chat so the rest can join. I would have done that, but I'm scared to minimize or change the screen because of my network.
Maybe I can do that.
All right, thank you.
Guys,
yes,
it's not a great piece. It's not a graded piece. So let's not think it's not graded. It's just to test our understanding of what it learned. Okay, so I have it there on the chat. Okay, oh, thank you, Samuel Sunny, for that. So we have 3 persons now. Now I think it's 4. Good. So we have 4 persons. 6, 7. Okay. How many people do we have on the chat generally? I think we are like 20 or so.
Yeah.
So we have 1 person.
It'll be around 20.
Can we have maybe 10 at least? With 10 people, maybe we can start. But I would really love every one of us. Oh, I'm far behind time.
But there's no problem. We have enough time for the quiz and also we'll take some questions after that.
So we have 9. We have 10. Maybe let's see if we can go to make it 15. And then if we have 15, then I think maybe we'll have to give I don't know, maybe Candle Web will have to give the first position something. Maybe they will buy some reward assets, some reward tokens and distribute to that.
Yeah,
So
we'll consider that.
thank you. We have 12. Amazing. So we need 3 more, please. 3 more, and then we are good to go. Just 3 more, we are good to go. Come on, guys, let's do this. It's simple. It's simple. Just need 3 more.
All right, join the quiz if you've not joined. It's going to be an easy pop-up quiz. So, okay, the code is the one on the screen right now. Abel, I think the code changed recently.
Oh, it's changed. Okay.
GOYQPO.
That's why you can just maybe make a screen here. If you have your phone, if you're using your phone, you can just screenshot that. But okay, I think we'll just begin with with the 13 people that we have. So guys, are we ready? We're ready. You drop a message in the chat box. Are we ready? Can we start?
Okay, if you're ready, you can drop a message or react and we'll drop the quiz. Then we jump into
that.
Nice.
Good.
We are
okay,
ready.
So the first question, a smart contract can fail or behave unexpectedly, mainly because of it's timed. Okay, I have 1 response. Okay, so I have just 4 response. Just 4 response. Please, guys, let's make it for the next one. So let's see what the answers are. Beam. Okay, fantastic. So of course, as said, poorly written code or logical error can make the logic of the smart contract fail. Oracle manipulation. We talked about what oracles are. How the data that is being breached is very, very important to be able to reflect the exact price of that particular token. And then we have one which is quite technical, which says insufficient gas phase during execution, which is also Very, very true. So let's go to the next one and see. So this one says, what distinguishes tokenized reward assets from traditional securitized assets? You can select more than one. I only have one response. Okay, good. So let's see what the answers are. So 1, 3, 4. Now, this one says they cannot be traded outside the issuing platform. Now, which is not true, because the whole concept of tokenization, mainly as we've seen in the process, the end goal is, of course, to bring it into the secondary market. And meaning it's actually going outside of its platform. And so it's able to, to attract liquidity from different places, from different part of the world, just like the way you can be in Nigeria, you can sign up in a particular exchange and you're able to access a particular token. And so that is the first answer. Every other one is actually true when it comes to reward asset tokenization, and that actually differentiates it from even the traditional digital asset. So the next one says, which of the following is not a key function of blockchain oracles? I talked about oracle for like maybe 5 minutes. So which of the following is not a key function? Okay. So let's see. Good. Amazing. So we have 6 persons out of 15 persons that were able to get that correctly, which is true, right? This is enabling blockchain network to execute transaction faster. So I think this is the last question. We've been able to address 5, right? Okay. I think we still have some. We still have more.
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's 3 questions so far.
Sorry, they are not easy. Why are institutions like JP Morgan, Franklin Templeton are significant in the reward asset space? Okay, they show tokenization. Okay. 7 responses. Fantastic. Let's see what the answers are. Good. So A, B, D. A, B, D. Now, the one that is wrong, it says that they rely solely on private blockchain with no interoperability. Now, this list might sound quite technical, but what we are saying here is only accessible within a private network, as it were, and an outsider or doesn't really have access to it. And when we talk about interoperability, it just has to do with a different blockchain being able to interact with each other. Now, going back to the context of taking an asset into the secondary market, everybody and everywhere can actually access it. Now, you can actually have this asset in different tokens. You can have it not tokens, in different networks. For example, you can have it in Ethereum network, you can have it in BSC, you can have it in Polygon, right? Now, the ability of all these networks to be able to communicate with each other is actually interoperability. And so if you're actually tokenizing a reward asset and you're actually bringing it into a platform, just like we saw an example by JP Morgan, which is what Kenix, and it was probably previously known as Onyx, right? And so this is an example for Franklin Templeton. We talked about the PubSX, right, which is even the token of their sticker. And so it's every other option is very, very true, aside, the fact that they rely on private blockchain with no interoperability. And so the last one I want everybody to participate in. So please, this is the final question, and then we'll give room for question and answer. When evaluating the price of the token reward asset, can you see the question fully from your own end?
Yes.
Okay, good. Nobody wants to respond? So we have 7 responses. So let's see what it is. Mean ABC. So we have how many people got it correctly? But of course, yeah. So that is that. And thank you so much for participating in this quiz. That will be the end of the quiz. So I will give room for question and answer. Isaac, the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the amazing session, Abel. Thank you so much for filling us with knowledge. It was really interesting hearing you speak about real-world assets and tokenizations. I know when we start this kind of conversation one-on-one, we never finish. So it's interesting to have you share with the class. So we are opening the floor for questions and answers. So if you have any question with regards to today's class on the topics of smart contracts, real-world assets, and tokenization, please drop it in the chat or raise up your hand and we would unmute you to speak, okay? Excellent. I can see some messages dropping. Okay, I have a question from Faith Achibong. She said, what happens to fiscal assets after tokenization, e.g. land? What happens to the fiscal land? And the second question, who is the land? Who is with the land and what is done with it? So that's the first question we have from Peter Chipon.
An interesting question. Meanwhile, let me just drop this thing. Sorry, please. I want us to go and watch this video. This is the video I wanted us to watch. In fact, I think this is one of the videos that spiked because I remember the first time Isaac asked me about reward asset tokenization. I think it was because of this particular video. I don't know if Isaac, if you can recall clearly.
Oh yes, I do recall the video clearly. I'm even going to rewatch it.
Exactly. Good. So the question is, what happens to the land, right? Very interesting question. Who asked that again so that I can just be direct to the person? Faith, exactly. So so this is it, Faith. We talked about securities, right? And we talked about ownership, we talked about compliance and the rest. Now, if a land, let me take you to the process, but let me just explain it without even, maybe Mr. Isaac might share the slide with you all at the end of the class. So in the process of tokenization, there's the behind the scene, and then there's the digital, there's the technical side of this thing. If I have a land, for example, I said I want to tokenize this land, right? The first thing, the ownership of that land is first of all confirmed, right? There's KYC, right? There's a different regulatory check that is being done to ensure that this particular land belongs to XYZ person. Right? Now, land itself is a fixed asset. It's always there. It's not as if you carry land somewhere, right? And so there's already like a background check to ensure that this particular land is owned by, in fact, most times it's usually even owned by entity. Most times. Because as I've said, in as much as anything can be tokenized, doesn't mean you can wake up one morning and you say you want to tokenize anything. If you go to if you meet most of like Ondo Finance, for example, there's a lot of compliance check before you be able to even do any form of tokenization. And so there's a serious form of compliance check that is being done before the tokenization happens. So for the physical land, it's just there. And the security of that land is being guided by whatever entity that allows the tokenization of that particular asset. Take, for example, Ubuntu that we've said, Ubuntu tribe that we've said, what they tokenize is what is gold, right? They've been able to fractionalize those goods so that you'll be able to participate in the purchase of that. But they have a vote, and I think one of their votes is actually in Switzerland. You can actually research it. It's in Switzerland, right? And so you are buying the digital form of that good, but there's the physical. You are buying, of course, you are buying the digital form of that good, but there's the physical form of the good that is in a vault, and that is why we talked about the security aspect of it, right? And we also talk about even the digital form of that particular token that has been asset that has been tokenized also needs some form of security, and that's why we talked about some of the big custodian players like the GK8, like the Fire Blocks, like the Anchorage, the Kalido, sorry for the pronunciation, but we have so many. We have the Custodia as well. There are so many of them, right? And so, yes, this security is being enabled on both sides, both for the physical asset and even both on the side of the digital asset. If it is an NFT art, if it's not even, if it's a physical art, there's also some level of check because you are not tokenizing it yourself, except maybe you have a tokenization platform, right? You are meeting platforms that we've seen. One of the common platform is Damrev, DAMREV. You can actually search them, right? They help you, they enable you to do that. They have their processes to be able to ensure the security of the physical asset, as it were. All right. And we also have other digital platforms that also enable the security of the digital or the tokenized asset as well. Right. And now the question is who is with the land and what is done with the land. Now, for land particularly, it's quite interesting, as I've said, mostly being done by real estate agents, right? The platform we saw that particularly focus on real estate, they handle the security of that particular land, right? They handle the security of that particular land. And whatever it is that's happening in that particular land in terms of development of, as we've said, there's an oracle to be able to, to update every price action with digital asset so that, of course, they mirror each other and then their price is actually the same, right? So for land, the security is quite obvious, and given the fact that it's being managed by sometimes not even just an individual, but by a group of entities, makes it more secure, and also even the digital aspect of it as well. I don't know if that is clear by you. Yeah, so
Thank you so much for that explanation, Abel. Faith, are you okay with do you understand it clearly now? Let us know in the chat. And if you do have any other questions or anyone with any other questions, please raise up your hand or drop it in the chat and we'll address it. Okay, I think she has a follow-up question.
I think Faith is also asking another interesting question. So are you saying that after tokenization and fractions of the land have been bought on chain, the initial owner of the land cannot decide to build on the land or farm on it? Yes, thank you so much for that question. Now, so think of it like stocks. Why do you buy stock, for example? Right? Of course, the answer is very obvious, right? Most times, mostly investments are strategy. For real world assets, as we said, right? If you are involving in things like that, you are just having a fractional ownership. And why you're having a fractional ownership? Possibly because you see there's a potential for growth of that particular property. If your asset is being tokenized on chain, right? Your interaction with what's on chain is what is of much more direct concerns to you, right? You are much more. You might be worried if whatever activity that is going on off chain, like let's say with the physical, and let's say that is being managed by whatever entity is not managing it properly rather. Let me use the word properly. It's not managing it properly. It creates a concern, even with what's on the tokenized aspect, on the digital token itself, right? And so you are buying that because probably you are speculating on the fact that, okay, this particular land is in a very good position, and then probably people managing it are probably doing their marketing strategy well, or maybe so any other reason as it were. But yes, as you said, when you have buy a fraction of that particular land, it's also the same as just buying shares, because you're just having a fraction of the whole big picture, right? And now, as to whether the person that owns the land can build on it or not, it depends on the institution that allows the tokenization of that asset, right? Because if the owner of the asset, say for example, he wants to build on that land, right? The platform allows the development of that particular land. It's also good for even the digital aspect, the digital token of that particular land, because it's like adding value to even the land itself. Do you understand? And so it's more of mirroring an investment, just like as it were in terms of stock, really, in terms of stock. Yeah, so let's also take other questions, and then if you also need more clarity, why not? But let's also take other questions.
Thank you so much, Abel, for that answer. Thank you. So Faith, yeah, in summary, she said it depends on the body that aided the tokenization of the asset, and you farming on it or building on it is basically increasing the value of the asset. So any more questions? If you do have any more questions, we'll take them. And if there's no question, we'll be rounding up today's session. So for the last class, a lot of people were unable to sign their attendances. So we are opening the last attendance and also the attendance for this particular class. If you visit our platform right now, you'd be able to see the two attendances available. So please sign them before the deadline tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll be taking one more question on smart contract tokenization and real world asset. If you have any other question, just drop it in the chat, raise up your hand, and Abel would answer you and take care of the question. And if there's no other questions, we'll be rounding up the class. So attendance is live. I'll be dropping it also in the chats, in the class chats. Okay, we have a question from Kenneth Okoro. How do you reconcile maximum supply of a real world? Okay, let me read this again. How do you reconcile maximum supply of a real world asset?
Okay, I also think I also need to read it again. How do we reconcile maximum supply of a real world supply?
Okay, I think he meant real world assets.
Okay, so how do we reconcile maximum supply of real world assets with the amount of physical assets available? Okay, I think your real world asset is also the same thing as physical asset. But if Kenneth, if you're referring to, let's say, in terms of the fractionalization, in terms of digitization of that asset, I would want to answer on that aspect, if that is what you mean, like the maximum supply of the reward asset, right, with the physical asset, right? So, and the reward asset, you're talking about a tokenized version of the reward asset, right? So, remember I said, because everything can be tokenized, doesn't mean everything will be tokenized, right? So if you have that in mind, and you know that you cannot just wake up one morning and say, my car is fine, I want to tokenize it, right? But even if you at all, the platform allows you to actually tokenize that, you are actually fractionalizing it with a maximum supply, and this is where the tokenomics comes into place. If I can share my screen again, when we're talking about the tokenization process, we see different processes of the tokenization. Let me do that. Let me just do that briefly. Oh, yeah. Yes. Let's go here. Can you see my screen, Isaac?
Oh yes, we can.
Yeah. So these are assets, for example, right? There's a verification of ownership over that particular asset, which is something related to what Faith is asking. Now, there's also a valuation of that particular asset, and then there's creating the tokenomics. And now this is where the maximum supply of the fractionalization actually comes into place, right? If I had an art, for example, which is of value, right, and the platform wants to tokenize it, right, they can value it by a particular supply, let's say 20 ART token as the maximum supply, right? I've been able to break that one particular art into 20 ART tokens, And so that is just the maximum supply. And I can't even produce another form of supply again for that particular asset, right? And so yes, for each particular tokenized, because these also have some form of digital identity. I really don't want to go into technical details, right? Because it's just like NFTs as it were. NFT is one of the clearest example of tokenization, non-fungible tokens, and they are quite unique in their in themselves, right? And so that is actually what is really happening here when you talk about maximum supply. I just creating you are tokenizing it and giving a cap as to the representation of that particular physical asset that you have. I don't know if that answers that this answers your question, but I don't know if you're clear with that, Kenneth.
Okay, I think what we'll do, we haven't discussed NFT in any of the previous classes. Okay, Kenneth said it's clear enough, but I think we'll mention that we'll find a way to educate our class on NFTs and other related topics that help them understand it better. Thank you so much, Abel. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you to everyone who participated. We really appreciate you, Abel. Thanks for sharing your time, your knowledge, and thanks for the commitment. We say a big thank you, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. God bless you. Thanks, Abel.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank everyone for joining. I hope you've been able to have some added knowledge to what the concept of tokenization is and all of you. And I will encourage us to also do more research. The space is new. There are people doing already pulling up a lot of research and people doing an amazing thing. And it would be good to also keep up with the trend and also know what is going on. So thank you, Isaac, for having me. Thanks to the whole entire team of RWA for putting stuff like this. Is very, very important and very, very helpful, especially when it comes to awareness and adoption. So thank you very much, and thanks to CandoWeb, and also thanks to everyone that have been able to commit to learning and growing.
We appreciate you, Abel. No. All right, thanks, class. We'll see you back in the community. Don't forget the attendance is live for today. Make sure you sign the attendance. And also for the past class, we will open the attendance for you also. The deadline is 4 p.m. by tomorrow. Make sure you've signed it. And then we'll have our weekly quizzes on the community. As usual, we'll upload the recording of this class and the last one on Sunday. And the weekly quizzes would be like, so see you back in the community. Thanks everyone and have an amazing night. Thanks Kenneth. Thanks Faith. Thank you everyone. Good night. Good night, Abel.
Good night.